There exist many different achievements a player can earn while playing a game, and there are many different ways in which to obtain these achievements. Some will ask you to do a rather simple thing that can be accomplished by the large majority of a game's player base. Stuff like completing a chapter in the game's story, using a common item, or performing a certain action a certain number of times. For this reason, these achievements are always overshadowed by a game's more difficult challenges, such as beating it on the hardest difficulty or performing a no-death run. But there are certain games that will reward you for doing something truly brutal, something you maybe never considered doing until you realize there was some kind of reward for doing it. Whether that brutal thing needs to be done to an enemy, yourself, or an innocent bystander, these are the sort of tasks you imagine only a true sadist would enjoy completing. Or just obsessive compulsives who need that platinum trophy. With all this in mind, I'm Will for WhatCulture, and here are 10 video games that reward you for brutal things. 10. Gears of War 3. From the very first moment we saw Marcus and company holding rifles with chainsaw attachments, we knew things were gonna get pretty messy. The Gears of War series is not only one of the most popular and successful Xbox exclusive games, but also one of the most recognizable, thanks to its powerful weapons, memorable characters, and thrilling gameplay. This is also helped by the game's unique and iconic style, as it merges horror and shooter elements in a gloriously gory way. One way in which the game utilizes its themes of gore is through its execution moves, where players can finish off their downed enemies with a finisher move, either with their gun or their bare fists. This became so popular with fans that Gears 3 had a unique execution for every single weapon in the game. So it was inevitable the game would include the judge, jury, and executioner achievement for getting a kill with every possible execution. The executions are as monstrous as they are creative, as you end up caving in heads, ripping off arms, and using your sniper rifle like a sledgehammer. As badass as they are, you will always be glad to not be on the receiving end. 9. Dead Space 2. The only thing more barbarous than the unrelenting horde of necromorphs you have to fight in this sci-fi horror shooter is the way in which you must fight them. Isaac Clarke must make do with whatever weapon he can get his hand on, which includes, but is not limited to, a plasma cutter, flamethrower, energy beam, futuristic chainsaw, and a suit with telekinetic abilities. All of these come in pretty handy when the best way to fight the enemies is to cut off their limbs. There's even an achievement for severing 2,500 necromorph limbs, but as gruesome as that is, that's not the entry on this list. The Cross Your Heart Hope to Die achievement is awarded when you willingly lie down on an operating table and insert a needle into Isaac's pupil. If you mess it up, and you probably will because it's freaking terrifying, Isaac will scream in agony and die after you impale his eye. Get it right, and you have to watch Isaac go limp for a few seconds as the needle stays in his eye for what feels like an eternity. Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. 8. Doom Eternal. Doom Guy and veterans of the Doom series are no strangers to the gruesome and barbaric side of games. For decades, players have grown accustomed to the Doom games, but with every new entry, they try to add something different that will raise the bar in first-person shooters, and this was certainly the case with the most recent game in the series. Now, Doom 2016 introduced us all to the Glory Kill, which allows players to approach staggered demons and witness Doom Guy rip and tear his way through them in a glorious mini cutscene. This mechanic would return in Doom Eternal, but with the darn it they keep breaking achievement, where players have to perform 33 unique glory kills in a single save slot. This all leads to players working their way through the demonic armies of hell as they systematically choose which enemies to stagger, how to attack them, and which glory kill to go for in order to contribute to the achievement. After doing this for a while, players may start to feel bad for the demons, but that feeling soon disappears when you remember how much fun it is watching them being torn apart like wet tissue paper. 7. Overlord 2. When you play a game where the goal of the main character is to take over the world, you can expect them to get up to some pretty vile things. Such was the case in the Overlord series. The action role-playing games let players take the role of the Overlord, a mysterious warrior with dark magic who can create an army of goblin-like creatures called minions. By exploring the world, pillaging villages, and defeating enemies, players can gather treasure and other resources that they can use to improve the fighting abilities of their minions and increase the size of their army. But out of all the horrendous things you can do and be rewarded for in Overlord 2, none of them seems to be quite as brutal as the Seal Slayer achievement, where you're required to kill 100 baby seals. Now, although you do need to kill creatures in order to harvest the life force needed to create new forces for your army, there's just something so monstrously savage about murdering so many defenseless and innocent creatures. No matter how hard you may try, this achievement will always remind you of your seal murdering past, and that ultimately you're kind of a terrible person. 6. Red Dead Redemption. Now, just because John Marston is forced into working with the US government, that does not mean that his shooting, stabbing, cheating, robbing, and murdering days are behind him. At least, not while the players of RDR have anything to say about it. As players progress through the game, they are free to wander the Wild West. This provides the perfect setting to reference many famous Western films and their characters, but there is one reference that requires the player to do something especially cruel, and that's to recreate one of the most cliché scenes in early Western films. The dastardly achievement is awarded after the player hogties a female NPC, places them on a train track, and watches them be crushed by an oncoming train. You can't just leave them there, you actually have to watch to get the achievements. I know you should feel guilty, but it's just so delightfully mustache-twirlingly evil that it's impossible not to enjoy it. At least until you realise, once again, that you probably are a horrible person. Number 5. Mortal Kombat 11. This is a list about brutal things there is no way Mortal Kombat wouldn't show up somewhere. After all, it was the original Mortal Kombat game that sparked so much controversy that the entire industry was forced to rethink how games would be rated for the public. Right from the beginning, the Mortal Kombat series allowed players to duke it out in relentless hand-to-hand combat, with a K. As the series progressed, it introduced a host of new ways for players to clobber the life out of one another. Each character has their own unique fighting style, a signature combo move that deals out massive damage, and their fatalities that will finish off their opponents in ways that are as gruesome as they are glorious. So it's not out of place for the game to reward players with their Blood in the Water achievement for spilling 10,000 pints of blood. Not an especially hard thing to do in a game designed to spill as much blood as possible, but when the achievement does pop, you just can't help but react with a mix of shock and rumination. And a little bit of pride, obviously. 4. Red Dead Redemption 2. In the sequel to their game set in the final days of the Wild West, Rockstar decided to go further back in time and tell the story of Arthur Morgan, as he and his fellow gang members are tracked down by the law and the Pinkerton Detective Agency. There are a lot of things to keep players entertained in a game like this and a lot of achievements to be unlocked, but there is one in particular that will fill every player with a sense of dread and fear. The Grin and Bear It achievement requires the player to survive 18 bear attacks and kill the bear each time. It's not a pleasant experience for anyone involved. Not for the player, who has to track down each bear individually, let them attack, and hope they can do enough damage before the bear can kill them, and not for the bears, because they end up dead. But certainly not for poor Arthur Morgan, as you have to listen to him scream in pain during every single bear attack. 3. God of War 3. There is no doubt that players have done some quite horrendous things, all in the name of helping Kratos get his revenge against Zeus and the rest of the Greek pantheon. But the real conundrum is deciding which of his deeds is the most brutal. After all, Kratos kills nearly every god he encounters in the most vicious ways possible. He gouges out Poseidon's eyes before snapping his neck, bludgeons Hercules' face in, and cuts off Hermes' legs. But it's the utter humiliation of Hades that stands out the most. After using his dead wife's coffin as a battering ram to enter the boss fight, Kratos then carves off chunks of Hades' flesh before ripping his helmet off, smashing him into the ceiling a few times, taking his weapons, and then using them to rip out his soul and cast his corpse into the river Styx. Not only do you get the Depths Below trophy for killing Hades, but you also get to keep his weapons. The Claws of Hades. Yeah, when it comes to defying death, Kratos really takes it to a new level. 2. Blitz the League 2. American football is one of the most physically demanding contact sports in the world. Teams of powerful athletes competing in a test of speed, endurance, tactics, and power. Some argue that the game is perfect the way it is. However, players of the Blitz series would argue otherwise. Blitz the League 2 lets players enjoy a version of American football with an extra emphasis on crunching tackles with often devastating injuries. Broken femurs, forearms, and ribs are common in both the story and multiplayer modes of this grueling version of America's #1 sport. There is even an achievement for dishing out such punishment, but I gotta tell ya, it's not something you're gonna feel proud about. Testicle demands that you rupture 10 scrotums in any mode of play. This means deliberately aiming for your opponent's hips as you mash buttons to generate as much power as possible before suplexing them into the ground. If that wasn't brutal enough, you get to watch an X-ray of their scrotum bursting under the weight of your tackle. Yep, Enjoy! 1. Sniper Elite 4. They say that all is fair in love and war, but this achievement in Sniper Elite 4 may change people's minds about that. The game prides itself on making players feel like a pure badass, as they line up their shots, adjust for the wind, and blast away Nazi soldiers from hundreds of meters away. The extra satisfaction comes from the slow motion cutscene of your bullet flying across the battlefield and delivering the final blow. You may also be treated to an X-ray of your shot piercing one of their vital organs. So, you may be able to guess which 2 organs you need to shoot in order to accomplish the Nutcracker achievement. After you shoot your chosen victim in the foot to incapacitate them, you must then aim below their waist and fire their testicles into oblivion. This could also result in a slow motion cutscene as your bullet reduces the dynamic duo into a red mush. Now sure, on a concept level it sounds pretty funny, but after you've done it, it really makes you feel like you've committed some kind of war crime, and reminds you why the Geneva Convention exists. And there you have it folks, 10 video games that reward you for brutal things. Feel free to drop this video a like if you enjoyed it, and drop me a follow on Twitter at YouSlyDogU. I'm Will for WhatCulture, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.